I never believed in the supernatural. Ghosts, demons, spirits, they were all just stories to scare children and entertain adults. But that was before I went on a road trip to Sawmill City Road in Shelton, Connecticut. It was a spur-of-the-moment trip. My best friend, Mark, and I had been planning on going on a road trip for a while, but with our busy schedules, we never got around to it. But when Mark suddenly had a week off from work, we decided to take advantage of it and hit the road. We packed our bags, grabbed some snacks, and hit the road. Mark had always been the adventurous one, so he took the lead with our route. He had heard about an abandoned sawmill on Sawmill City Road and thought it would be the perfect place to check out. As we drove through the winding roads, surrounded by trees and dense forests, I couldn't help feeling a twinge of unease. But I pushed it aside, thinking it was just nerves from being on a road trip in the middle of nowhere. We finally reached Sawmill City Road, and as we drove down the narrow road, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The road was empty, and there were no other cars or houses in sight. Just the eerie silence and the occasional rustling of leaves. Mark parked the car near the entrance of the abandoned sawmill, and we got out to explore. The mill was massive, with cracked walls and broken windows. It was clear that no one had been there for years. Despite feeling a little creeped out, I couldn't help feeling a sense of excitement. We were in an abandoned sawmill, and I felt like I was in one of those horror movies I love to watch. We explored the mill for what felt like hours, making our way through the debris and trying to imagine what it would have been like when it was still operating. As the sun began to set, we decided to head back to the car and call it a day. But just as we were about to leave, I noticed a figure standing at the end of the road. It was a woman, dressed in a long white dress, with long black hair covering her face. She seemed to be staring right at us. I nudged Mark and pointed towards the woman, but when we looked back, she was gone. "We should probably leave," I said, my heart racing. But Mark, being the fearless one, shrugged it off and said it was probably just a figment of my imagination. We got back in the car and drove away, leaving the abandoned sawmill behind. But the image of the mysterious woman stayed with me. As we continued driving, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being followed. I kept glancing at the side mirror, only to see darkness behind us. I was about to voice my concerns to Mark when suddenly, there was a loud bang, and the car came to a screeching halt. "What the hell was that?" Mark exclaimed, getting out of the car to inspect the damage. I followed him, and we saw that we had a flat tire. In the distance, we could see the lights of a small gas station, and we decided to walk there to get help. As we made our way towards the gas station, I couldn't shake off the feeling that someone or something was watching us. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but there was no one there. We finally reached the gas station, and the attendant was kind enough to give us a lift back to our car. As we were driving back, Mark and I couldn't help but feel relieved that we were out of that creepy place. But our relief was short-lived when we saw something that made our blood run cold. Our car was no longer parked where we had left it. In a panic, we got out of the gas station attendant's car and began searching for our car. We searched the area for hours, but there was no sign of our car. As the night grew darker, we decided to call the police and report our car stolen. But as soon as I reached for my phone, I noticed something shiny on the ground. It was Mark's car key. He must have dropped it while we were walking here, I thought to myself. But as I turned around to tell Mark, what I saw made my heart drop. There, standing a few feet away from us, was the mysterious lady from the abandoned sawmill. Only this time, she was holding something in her hand, Mark's phone. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth. The woman's hair was covering her face, but I could see her sinister smile. I grabbed Mark's hand and pulled him towards the gas station, knowing that we needed to get help. But when we reached the gas station, there was no one there. It was completely deserted. In a panic, we ran back to where we had last seen the woman, but she was gone, along with Mark's phone. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no car and no way to contact anyone for help. As the realization sank in, I knew that this was all my fault. If only I had listened to my gut feeling and left when I saw the woman at the abandoned sawmill. If only I had believed in the supernatural sooner. But it was too late to change things now. We were alone, and the only option we had was to walk back to civilization. As we made our way through the dark, deserted roads, I could feel someone or something following us. I could hear whispering and the sound of footsteps, but every time I turned around, there was no one there. By the time we reached the nearest town, it was already morning. We immediately went to the police and told them everything that had happened. They searched the area and found our car at the abandoned sawmill, covered in scratches and with all the tires slashed. Despite their efforts, they could not find the mysterious woman, and Mark's phone was never recovered. We were lucky to have escaped with our lives, but the experience had scarred us for life. Mark never fully recovered from the incident, and he swore to never go on a road trip again. As for me, I couldn't shake off the feeling that the mysterious woman was still out there, watching and waiting for her next victim on Sawmill City Road. And every time I think about that road trip, I can't help but feel guilty for my mistake, a mistake that almost cost us our lives. I had always been a thrill seeker, constantly looking for new and exciting adventures. So when my friends and I decided to go on a road trip to Sawmill City in Shelton, Connecticut, I was beyond thrilled. We had heard rumors about the city being the perfect spot for a horror-themed trip, and I couldn't wait to experience it all. We packed our bags and hit the road, eager for what the city had in store for us. As we drove through the winding roads, the atmosphere suddenly changed. The once busy streets and lively cities were now replaced by dense forests and eerie silence. My excitement quickly turned into a sense of unease, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. As we got closer to Sawmill City, we noticed that the road became narrower and more desolate. The trees seemed to close in on us, almost as if they were trying to block our path. But we were determined to reach our destination, so we pushed on. When we finally arrived at the city, we were amazed at how accurately the rumors depicted it. The buildings were old and decaying, the streets were deserted, and there was an eerie fog hovering over the entire area. We checked into our hotel and decided to explore the city. Our first stop was the famous Sawmill Road, known for its gruesome history and sightings of the paranormal. We walked along the road, feeling a chill in the air, and the sound of our footsteps echoing through the deserted streets. Suddenly, we heard a blood-curdling scream coming from a nearby building. We were frozen in fear, not knowing what to do. My friend Emma, who was always the bravest of us, volunteered to check it out. We protested, but she was adamant, and so we reluctantly followed her. The building was abandoned and dilapidated, with broken windows and a rusty gate. We cautiously entered, our hearts pounding with fear. The inside of the building was even more sinister than the outside. The walls were covered in graffiti, and the floors were littered with trash. We searched every room, but there was no sign of anyone. Just as we were about to leave, we heard another scream, but this time it was closer. We followed the sound and found ourselves in a dark hallway. As we walked, the sounds became more and more intense. We finally reached a door at the end of the hallway, and the screams were coming from behind it. Emma, being the brave soul that she was, opened the door slowly. We were met with a chilling sight. A woman, dressed in all black and with long, tangled hair, was sitting in the corner, rocking back and forth and screaming. We were taken aback, to say the least. Emma tried to approach her, asking if she needed help, but the woman just let out a maniacal laugh. That's when we noticed a pile of bones on the floor next to her. We screamed and ran out of the building, not wanting to stick around any longer. We were convinced that the woman was the reason for all the disappearances in Sawmill City. We quickly made our way back to our hotel, too scared to even look back. As soon as we got back, we locked ourselves in our room, trying to process what we had just witnessed. The thought of that woman and the bones haunted us, and we couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that had fallen upon us. As the night went on, we heard strange noises coming from outside our room. We could hear footsteps, whispers, and even the sound of bones rattling. We were terrified and didn't know what to do. We decided to call the police, but when they arrived, they found nothing. Feeling uneasy and unable to sleep, I decided to go out for a walk in the hope of calming my nerves. As I walked towards Sawmill Road, I felt a sudden chill in the air. That's when I saw her again. The mysterious lady, sitting on the hood of my friend's car, with her long hair covering her face and her laughter echoing through the empty streets. I ran back to the hotel, breathless and shaking. I told my friends what I had seen, and we were all terrified. We decided to leave the city the next morning, but it seemed like fate had a different plan for us. The next morning, we woke up to find that Emma was missing. We searched high and low for her, but she was nowhere to be found. We immediately reported it to the police, and it didn't take long for them to find her body, lying in a ditch on Sawmill Road, her life taken by a mysterious figure. The police were unable to find any leads or suspects, but I knew deep down that it was the woman we had encountered the day before. She had taken Emma's life as a sacrifice, and I couldn't help but feel guilty. If only we had never gone on that road trip, my friend would still be alive. To this day, I still have nightmares about that road trip. The screams of that woman, the mysterious figure, and the sight of Emma's lifeless body haunt me constantly. I will never forget the horrors we experienced on Sawmill City Road, and I warn anyone who plans on going there to think twice and beware of the sinister forces that lurk in that city. It was a beautiful summer day when my family and I decided to take a road trip to Sawmill City in Connecticut. The sun was shining, and we were all in high spirits as we drove along the winding roads. As we were passing through the Sawmill City Road, my wife suddenly jolted in her seat and pointed towards the side of the road. "Look, there's a woman walking on the road all alone," she exclaimed. I turned to see the woman she was pointing at. She was dressed in old-style clothing, and her long gray hair was flowing behind her as she walked barefoot. It seemed odd to see someone dressed like that in the middle of nowhere. My wife, being the kind-hearted woman she is, insisted we stop and offer the woman a ride. Without thinking much, I pulled over to the side of the road and rolled down the window. "Excuse me, ma'am. Would you like a ride somewhere?" I asked the woman. To my surprise, she didn't respond. She just kept walking, her eyes fixed straight ahead. I tried again. "Ma'am, are you lost? We can help you get home." Still no response. The woman just kept walking, her long gray hair covering her face. Feeling a bit uneasy, I turned to my wife, who had a worried expression on her face. "Let's just go. I don't think she wants our help," she said, her voice shaking a little. I couldn't agree more. I started the car and drove off, looking behind in the rearview mirror to make sure the woman wasn't following us. To our relief, she was nowhere in sight. We continued our journey, but the encounter with the strange woman stayed fresh in our minds. We couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that had crept over us. After driving for about an hour, my wife suddenly gasped and pointed out the window. My heart sank as I saw the same woman walking in the same direction we were heading. "How is that possible?" I muttered, my hands tightening around the steering wheel. I drove on, hoping to put some distance between us and the woman, but no matter how fast we went, she seemed to be right behind us, almost as if she was keeping pace with our car. We were starting to get scared now. Who was this woman? And how was she able to walk for hours without getting tired? My thoughts were interrupted when my son, who had been playing on his phone the whole time, let out a blood-curdling scream. I slammed on the brakes, and my daughter, who had been dozing off in the back seat, woke up with a start. "What happened?" I cried, my heart racing. My son was pointing at his phone, his hand trembling. "I just took a photo of the woman, and look what I got," he said, showing us his phone. In the photo, we could see the woman walking, but her face was blurred. It almost looked like she had no face at all, just a blur where her features should be. My wife and I exchanged a horrified look. Suddenly, everything made sense. The woman's strange behavior, her old-style clothing, and even her ability to walk for hours without getting tired. She must be a ghost. We were all in a state of shock as we slowly drove away, still keeping an eye on the mysterious woman. After a few minutes, she vanished into thin air, leaving us with more questions than answers. We knew we had to get out of that road as soon as possible. We didn't want to be around when the ghostly woman appeared again. I drove as fast as I could, ignoring the speed limit and the danger of driving recklessly. It wasn't until we were a good distance away from Sawmill City Road that we finally relaxed. We couldn't believe what had just happened. We had never encountered a ghost before, and it was a terrifying experience. We decided not to tell anyone about it, afraid they would think we were crazy. But the memory of the ghostly woman stayed with us for a long time. A few months later, my wife and I were watching a documentary about the Sawmill City Road when we saw a familiar face. It was the woman we had encountered. According to the documentary, she was a young woman who had lived in the area many years ago. She had lost her husband in a tragic accident, and her grief had driven her to take her own life by walking into the woods never to return. Chills ran down our spines as we realized that we had encountered her ghost that day. The woman we thought was lost and needed our help had been dead for years. It was a chilling realization that left us with a lingering fear of ever going near the Sawmill City Road again. From then on, we made sure to avoid that road, and we never encountered the ghostly woman again. The encounter with the ghostly woman on Sawmill City Road is something my family and I will never forget. It was a reminder that there are some mysteries in life that can never be explained, only experienced. And we were lucky enough to have experienced one of them. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I had been planning our epic road trip for months. We were both avid travelers and decided to explore the east coast of the United States, starting with New York and ending in Florida. We had mapped out our route, booked our accommodations, and packed our bags full of snacks and supplies. Little did we know, our trip would take an unexpected and terrifying turn. We set off early in the morning, eager to hit the road and begin our adventure. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and the excitement was palpable in the air. Sarah and I were singing along to our favorite songs, admiring the picturesque countryside as we drove through Connecticut. We were making great time and had no reason to believe that anything could go wrong. As we approached the town of Shelton, our GPS directed us to take a detour onto Sawmill City Road. At first, we didn't think anything of it. After all, sometimes detours can lead to unexpected discoveries. As we drove down the narrow and winding road, the scenery began to change. The trees grew taller and thicker, and the once peaceful atmosphere became eerie and ominous. Sarah noticed something in the distance and pointed it out to me. It was an old sawmill, abandoned and decrepit. Its rusted metal walls and broken windows gave off a sense of foreboding. I suggested that we turn around and find a different route, but Sarah was curious. She wanted to take a closer look, and being the adventurous person that I am, I couldn't deny her. We parked our car and got out to explore the sawmill. As we walked around, Sarah couldn't help but take pictures of every little detail, while I admired the old machinery and equipment. We were so caught up in our own world that we didn't even notice the sun had started to set. Suddenly, Sarah called out to me in a panicked voice, "Did you hear that?" I turned around to see her standing a few yards away, looking towards the edge of the property. I didn't hear anything, but I could see that she was visibly shaken. I walked over to her and asked her what was wrong. "I saw a lady standing by the trees over there," she said, pointing to the spot where she had been looking. She was just staring at us with this strange smile on her face. "I think we should leave." I reassured her that it was probably just someone from the town checking on the property. "But why would she be all the way out here?" Sarah asked, looking unsettled. Before I could say anything else, we heard a noise coming from inside the sawmill. It sounded like footsteps, but we couldn't see anyone. We decided it was best to leave before it got dark, and we made our way back to the car. As we were driving away, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the same lady standing by the edge of the property, her head following our car as we drove away. It sent chills down my spine, and I urged Sarah to drive faster. We put the strange encounter behind us and continued our journey. However, the sense of unease lingered, and we both fell into an uneasy silence. As we approached our next destination, we decided to stop for the night at a small motel. We were both exhausted from the day's events and quickly fell asleep. I was awoken by Sarah's screams in the middle of the night. I jolted up, disoriented and confused. She was thrashing around in bed, her eyes wide open, and she was screaming about the lady from the sawmill. "It's her! She's here! She's coming for us!" Sarah cried out, her voice trembling. I tried to calm her down, telling her it was just a bad dream, but she was inconsolable. Eventually, she fell back asleep, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, we packed up our things and got back on the road. We were both on edge, and I couldn't stop thinking about the strange lady and our encounter at the sawmill. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to have forgotten the whole incident and was back to her usual positive and adventurous self. As we approached the town of Mystic, I noticed a strange smell coming from the back of the car. We pulled over to investigate, and were horrified to discover that our trunk had a large blood stain on it. We looked at each other in shock and dread, not knowing what to make of it. We immediately drove to the nearest police station and explained our situation to the officer on duty. He was skeptical at first, thinking it was some sort of prank, but when we mentioned the mysterious lady, his expression changed. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there was a murder last night at an abandoned sawmill on Sawmill City Road," he said, his tone serious. My heart dropped to my stomach as I realized the gravity of the situation. The lady we saw at the sawmill was the victim, and the blood on our trunk could only mean one thing: her killer had tried to hide the evidence by placing it in our car. Sarah and I were questioned by the police, and our car was taken in as evidence. We spent the rest of our road trip giving statements and going through the ordeal of being suspects in a murder case. It wasn't until the killer was caught and confessed to the crime that we were finally able to go home. The rest of our trip was overshadowed by the terrifying experience. We never spoke about it again, but the memory of that night still haunts me. I can't help but wonder if Sarah's dream was a warning, and if we had listened, maybe we could have avoided the tragedy. Since then, I've become more cautious and aware of my surroundings. I've also learned to trust my instincts and not brush off any strange occurrences. I'll never forget the road trip that took a wrong turn on Sawmill City Road, and the eerie encounter with the mysterious lady that led to the death of an innocent victim. It was a chilly evening in early autumn when my friends and I, 5 of us in total, set off on our impromptu road trip. We were all college students at Yale University, still new to the city and eager to explore the surrounding areas. As we piled into my car, excited chatter filled the air and our spirits were high. We decided to head towards a nearby forest, as we had heard it was a popular spot for hiking and camping. None of us were particularly skilled at navigating, so we relied on my GPS to guide us. As we drove through the winding roads, we couldn't help but feel a sense of adventure and freedom. But little did I know, this road trip was about to take a dark and unexpected turn. As we approached the forest, my friends started whispering to each other, giggling mischievously. I couldn't help but feel a bit suspicious, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just one of their silly pranks. We parked the car at the entrance of the forest and prepared to head in. But as I reached for the door handle, my friend suddenly grabbed me and pushed me out of the car, quickly jumping back inside and driving off, leaving me stranded alone on the wooded road. I was furious and felt a sense of betrayal wash over me. How could my friends do this to me? I tried calling them, but my phone had no service in the middle of the forest. I was left with no choice but to start walking, hoping to eventually find my way back to civilization. As I made my way through the dense forest, the sun began to set and darkness crept in. My surroundings started to feel unfamiliar, and I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Every rustle of leaves and snap of branches made me jump, my heart pounding in my chest. Just when I was beginning to lose hope, I saw a figure in the distance. It was a woman in black clothing, walking towards me with a lantern in hand. She appeared to be from another era, with an old-fashioned dress and bonnet. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was like something out of a horror movie. I stood frozen in my tracks, feeling a mix of fear and intrigue. The woman stopped in front of me and gazed at me with piercing eyes. She had a stern expression on her face, and I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. A part of me wanted to run away, but another part was curious to know who this mysterious woman was. She finally spoke, her voice sounding both eerie and ancient. "You should not be here," she said in a tone that sent shivers down my spine. I quickly explained to her about my friends leaving me on the road as a prank. To my surprise, the woman seemed to understand. She told me that I was on Sawmill City Road, a road known for its ghostly sightings and other paranormal occurrences. My heart was racing as I listened to her words. I couldn't believe that I had stumbled upon a place with such a chilling reputation. As she continued to speak, the woman's story became more and more intriguing. She told me about a tragic accident that occurred on this road many years ago, claiming the lives of a group of teenagers on a road trip, just like us. I couldn't help but feel a connection to their story, as I found myself in a similar situation. But the woman's warning still lingered in my mind. She urged me to leave before it was too late, as the spirits of those who died on this road were said to haunt and lure unsuspecting victims. With a pounding heart, I thanked the woman for her warning and started to make my way back to the main road. But as I walked, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being followed. I could hear strange noises and see shadows moving in the corner of my eye. I picked up my pace, desperate to get out of this eerie place. Just when I thought I was close to escaping, I heard my friends' voices calling out to me. They had returned, laughing at their successful prank. But the joke was quickly forgotten as they saw the fear in my eyes. I quickly recounted my encounter with the woman and the strange events that followed. My friends, who were initially skeptical, now had a look of disbelief on their faces. We quickly got into the car and drove away, eager to leave Sawmill City Road behind. As we made our way back to Yale, we couldn't help but reflect on our scary and supernatural experience. From that day on, we never spoke of Sawmill City Road again, but the memory of that night will always stay with us. It taught us to be more cautious and to always be aware of our surroundings, especially when venturing into unfamiliar territory. And as for the mysterious woman in black, I often wonder if she truly was a ghost or just a kind stranger, trying to warn us of the dangers that lurked in the woods. But one thing is for sure, our road trip that night was one we would never forget.